I'm Mayor Barbara McMorrow, and on behalf of Deputy Mayor Lester Preston and Committeemen Anthony Amiano, Tom Cook, and David Salkin, I welcome you to From the Mayor's Desk. We're very fortunate to have with us today Rosemarie Peters, Monmouth County Surrogate, and she's going to be telling us what a surrogate is, what she does, what the office does. Some of you might be viewing the program and going, you know what, I don't know what a surrogate is. I have no idea what the surrogate's office does, and I'm sure by the end of our show today, all your questions will be answered. I will tell you that at the end of the show, we will have the contact information for the surrogate's office. So if you do have questions or if you are in need of the surrogate's office, that information will appear at the end of our show. So you don't have to worry about running out right now and getting pencil and paper or a computer or an iPhone or whatever we're using nowadays. Rosemarie, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
I know how busy you are. I know how busy that office is. And it's delightful that you were able to come and spend the afternoon with us and explain to our viewers exactly what the surrogate's office does. When we spoke earlier, we said that too often when people need the surrogate's office, it's because they're experiencing an unpleasant event. Usually it's for a will, somebody's passed away. So it's so much more than that. It is that, but so much more. So why don't we just begin with, what is the surrogate?
The surrogate is actually the judge of the surrogate's court, because although most people refer to our office as a surrogate's office, it's actually the surrogate's court. And it's part of the superior court system, but it's also a Department of County Government. So it's a little bit confusing as to where we fit into the picture. The surrogate's court handles estate matters, probating wills, appointing administrators if there is no will, but we also serve as clerk to the Superior Court for probate matters, which would include challenging a will, challenging the job an executor is doing on the will. We handle guardianships of incapacitated persons, which are a Superior Court matter, and then we follow up on all of the requirements that a guardian of an incapacitated person has to comply with. We handle guardianships of minors, guardianships of their person, if they're under 18, or if they have property. We have a surrogate's trust account for minors who've come into property in some way. We also handle adoptions for the family part of Superior Court. So it's a range of different things, and we also have the records for all of these matters in Monmouth County going back to when records were first kept.
Really?
So we have hundreds of years of records of estates and guardianships, inventories of estates, very historically interesting and genealogically interesting records. And they're in our records room, which is available to anybody who wants to stop in. We have computers and we have people who can help you to get started. So lots of different things.
You can research way back when.
If your family was in Monmouth County for any length of time, yes, you can come in and research your forebears.
I thought I knew quite a bit about the surrogate's office, but I did not even know that. So see, I just learned something today as well. Do they need to make an appointment to come in?
Not to look at the records. No, the records room is open 8:30 to 4:30 every day, and you just come in. There's no charge to look at the records that are available there. If you want copies, then there's a small charge.
Right, a minimum fee.
Yeah.
Well, it does so much. I'm exhausted just listening to all of it. So let's go to the will part. Maybe that's the part that people most think of when they think of the surrogate's office. They think they have to go and have their will probated. What is that process? Okay,
well, we handle about 3,500 estates a year in the Monmouth County Surrogate's office, but there's a surrogate's office in every county in the state. There's 21 counties, 21 surrogate's offices. So we handle the estates of people who die as a resident of Monmouth County. Of the 3,500 estates, about 70% involve a will, which is higher than the statistics that you read where they say, oh, only 50% of people have a will. But I think Monmouth County, because of its demographics, it's a little more affluent, and I think people, generally speaking, are better educated. So I think you probably have more people who have wills in a county like this. The other 30% are people who don't have a will, but who have something, some property that needs to be transferred
And when you
at
say
the time
property,
of their death.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
Yeah.
but when you say property, that can be more than just a house.
It's
Property
real
means-
estate or personal property.
Right.
Which could be your car or your jewelry or, you know, whatever else you own that is tangible, is your tangible assets. Depending on how those are owned and how they're titled, some people don't come into probate or will because they don't have any property that falls into the category of probate property. Maybe their property is jointly held with right of survivorship, and so the surviving joint owner gets the property when the first one dies. Or maybe they have a named beneficiary, an insurance policy, pension benefits. If there's a named beneficiary and that person survives, they can access that asset without coming to the surrogate's office and without probating your will. If you have a payable on death or transferable on death designation, say on a CD, that designee can go in and access that property without coming to the surrogate's office. So sometimes what's left is not a whole heck of a lot.
Right.
Maybe there's real estate that's in your name alone that nobody can sell or change title on without coming to the surrogate's office, or your car may be in your name alone and they can't transfer the title without coming to the surrogate's office. But whether people show up to probate a will kind of depends on what's left that's in your name and whether they're able to do something with it or not.
So they would, if they're not sure, they would come to your office and they could ask a
They
staff
can always
member
call.
or call.
Yes, we're happy to respond to basic questions like this. We can't give legal advice if there are problems in an estate, but if it's a simple question of what's the procedure, we're always happy to answer those questions, sure.
And if someone contests a will, they would go to court for that, they wouldn't come to you for...
No, my responsibility is limited to estates where there is not a conflict or a problem or an issue. Once those things crop up in an estate, I lose my authority and I have to send those matters to the Superior Court probate judge. So in order to get into Superior Court, you have to file what's called a complaint, which is an action. You're basically initiating an action in court. You file that with the surrogate's office, and then we serve as clerk to the probate judge and put that on the docket and make sure you've got all the appropriate documents in place and it's ready to be considered by the judge. So that's our clerical function with the Superior Court.
Would someone need to have an attorney with him or her?
It's always best to have an attorney. Occasionally people try to do this pro se, which means you're going to represent yourself. My opinion is that they never do as well in court because there's so many rules and deadlines and formats, and things have to be done a certain way before they're presented to a judge for a hearing or for a decision. And people who aren't used to doing this, I find, it's like anything else you're not used to doing. You tend not to be as good at it as the people who do it all the time.
Right.
And if it's something that's really important to you, my feeling is you should be represented by somebody who has some real knowledge and expertise in an area. So that's just my opinion.
Well, I understand that they would be able to fill out those forms correctly. They understand the deadlines that have to be made or the research that may have to be done trying to find out who actually does own something. It can get complicated.
It almost always is complicated, yeah, and very important in people's lives.
Yes.
I mean, I point out to people, people are always trying to save money, and one way they like to save money is by not hiring a lawyer and doing something themselves. But I say to them, if you needed an operation, wouldn't you hire a doctor? And you're not going to do that yourself.
Right.
There's a high level of expertise that goes into handling a legal matter, and I think people underestimate it because they're not familiar with it. But anyway,
Yeah, well, it could be maybe, once they get into the process, they see it, and then they can always hire an attorney, then come to you first and see that it's more than a simple matter.
Or they don't realize until it's too late,
Till
and the
they're in
decision
court.
has gone against them, and they're looking for somebody to blame, and they're certainly not prepared to blame themselves, so.
Yeah. Well, it's good to know, though, that you should have a will,
Yeah.
and just to make it easier on family and friends and
Yes.
whomever, and also that if it's not a simple matter, then to retain legal counsel would be good advice.
I think
So
it's good
that-
advice.
Yeah,
yes.
and you're the expert in the field. You have been doing this now for how many years you've been our surrogate?
This is my 13th.
Yes, so, wow, that's
Yes.
gone by quickly,
It goes
doesn't
by
it?
very quickly.
It does. Well, you're
Yeah.
so busy with all the things that go on in the office, because you also mentioned guardianships. So, what
Yeah.
role does the surrogate play in that?
Well, we're the clerk to the Superior Court probate part for guardianships of incapacitated persons. Many of them are elderly people with dementia who can no longer handle, decision-making in their lives, whether it's personal, medical, financial. They've just reached a point in their lives where they need somebody to look after them. Not everybody has a power of attorney and an advance health directive, which everyone should have, because those documents give the authority to handle those kinds of matters, personal matters, medical matters, to someone of your choice. But not everybody has them, and if they don't, and they get into a situation where they can't make decisions for themselves, that's when they have to go into court to get a guardianship. So that's probably the highest percentage of the guardianships of incapacitated persons. Another large percentage is developmentally disabled adults, because developmentally disabled people, when they're under 18, their parents take care of them and make decisions for them. When that person reaches 18, their parents no longer have the legal authority to be making decisions for them. And so they have to come into court and have a guardianship appointed. The court determines whether the person is incapacitated. Are they totally incapacitated? Are they partially incapacitated? Can they retain certain rights for themselves, or do they really need somebody to make all decisions? So the court appoints a court-appointed attorney who goes out and meets with the person, meets with the family, looks at their living situation, and reports back to the court, and advocates for the person, whatever the person's wishes are, if they're capable of expressing them. So it's a layer of protection that the courts give to any individual, so that somebody can't come into court and railroad them into a guardianship. And the New Jersey courts, I think, do a good job at that, because the attorneys they appoint are responsible people and experienced people, and really assist the court in determining, what's the best avenue for this person.
So for that period of time, that attorney is the guardian of that person?
No, the court-appointed attorney is just that, a court-appointed attorney who is to represent the interests of the allegedly incapacitated person. That's their role. But they have to advocate for that person. If the situation gets really confusing and there's a lot of conflict, the court can then appoint another attorney.
Really?
Who can report back to the court from an objective viewpoint as to what would be in the best interest of that person. But again, they're really looking out for that person. Yes. And I think that's the important thing, because I think people sometimes have the mistaken notion that somebody can just come into court and say, oh, my mother doesn't know what she's doing, she has dementia, and the court will just say, oh, okay, fine, I'll put you in charge of everything. It's not nearly that easy. And
doctor's
shouldn't
reports?
be. Two doctor's reports, yeah. Or in the case of a younger person, it can be a doctor's report and an individualized education program that they have through the schools. That can be instead of a second doctor's report. But it's all to help the court determine what is the level of incapacity of this person. Is it total, is it partial? And how do we deal with this situation so that we allow that person to retain some decision-making in areas where they're capable.
And who would be best to put in charge to actually be the guardian if that's necessary?
Yes, I mean, in most cases with developmentally disabled adults, they're young adults, and it's usually the parents who've been taking care of them anyway. Most of the guardianships in Monmouth County, the guardian is a family member. Either a parent or a child, if it's an elderly person. We don't have many guardians who are not family members. And I think that speaks well of, the kind of people who live here and their sense of responsibility.
Their
to
willingness
family
to
members,
become
yes.
the guardian, to take
And their
them on,
ability
and
as
their
well.
ability to do
Yeah.
so. But that's really, again, not something that's just easily done. It's something that requires documentation, as it should,
Mhm.
and to find out what's best for the person's interest. It's really amazing that we have all this in place to protect our most vulnerable residents
Yes.
in our county.
Well, it's interesting because the surrogate's name goes back to Old England, before the colonies were even set up. And the surrogate was actually a surrogate for the Archbishop of London in matters having to do with widows and orphans. So that came over, that title and that responsibility came over with the English colonists. And at one time, the surrogate was the surrogate for the governor of the colonies.
I never knew this.
It has a very long history, and the responsibilities of a surrogate in New Jersey have changed a little over time, but the tradition and the history goes back hundreds of years. And here we are. Now I'm a surrogate for the governor, actually, in these matters in which I have responsibility.
So you're the surrogate for the governor, and you're also the judge
Of the surrogates
of the
court
surrogates
in
court
Monmouth County.
Monmouth County.
And I'm deputy clerk to the Chancery Division probate part for all these probate matters, for estate matters, for guardianships, and deputy clerk to the Chancery Division family part, but only for adoptions.
Wow.
The happy things that take place in the
Yes.
family part. Most family part things are very unpleasant. They're divorces and juvenile issues and things like that. But we get to do the happy part of it.
Well, let's talk about that. What role do
Yes.
you play in that for adoptions?
The role we play is really a clerical role to the court, because the difficult aspects of adoptions, which can go on for years, are already out of the way, and the family is ready to come into court to actually adopt the child legally. So we get them when
They're ready.
They're ready, and generally speaking, the parents' rights have been terminated, or the parents have agreed that, they can't take care of the child, or they've given the child up for adoption. So that's when they come into the surrogate's office to file the paperwork, and we docket it for the court, and then see that through, and we have all the records. We're the keeper of the records for adoptions.
And do we have adoption day here or something?
We have adoption day. It's usually the week before Thanksgiving, which
Yeah.
I think is such an appropriate time. It's the beginning of the holiday season, and we have anywhere, I think the low year, we had 16 adoptions that were done on adoption day, but it's gone all the way up to 30.
Really?
And all of those adoptions are done on the same day. There's a program at the courthouse, there are speakers, there are refreshments and gifts for all the kids and their siblings, and it is like happiness personified. It's wonderful, and it puts you in a mood going into the holiday
Yes.
season, which is all about love, is it not? And
Yes, and being
that's-
thankful, so right before
Yes.
Thanksgiving is the perfect time as well. And there's usually a picture in the paper about, with everyone celebrating that moment.
Yes.
It's a great human interest story.
It is.
With all
It
the
is.
news that's usually so bad or so depressing, this is so delightful and so inspiring.
Yes.
That it's the
And
good
of course,
part.
so much of what we deal with in the surrogate's office is dealing with families in crisis and at unhappy times of their lives. So this is kind of the bright spot in our year as well. We look forward to it.
So we talked about wills and we talked about guardianship. What else would be one of the areas?
Well, I didn't talk about guardianships of minors.
Okay.
Sometimes minors will need a guardian of the person if their parents can't take care of them. Sometimes a family member will come in and get a guardianship so that they can sign them up for school, so that they can deal with medical professionals if the child needs any care. So they get the responsibility to make all those decisions for the child. We also have guardianships of the property of minors, because minors can come into money, but they're not allowed to hold on to money themselves. Maybe they were involved in a lawsuit, maybe they were hurt, and that they get some kind of a settlement. and the settlement will direct that money comes into the surrogate's office, where we put it in our trust fund, gains interest, and then when they're 18, they can get the money. Sometimes they get it through a bequest in a will, sometimes they get it through insurance proceeds. Someone that close to them dies and they were the beneficiary, and sometimes that money comes into the surrogate's office. So we have over 500 accounts for minors and over $20 million deposited that we just put in the trust fund, and that's where it stays. We appoint a guardian of the property. If they want to use any of that money before the child turns 18, they have to petition the Superior Court judge for use of funds, and they have to provide information as to what they want to use it for.
And how it will benefit the child.
And how it will benefit the child, yeah. And then the judge makes the decision.
So your office really covers so many different areas. No wonder it's so busy all the time.
Yes.
You can understand now why I said thank you for coming today, because Rosemary's out of her office right now. I'm sure when you go back, there'll be just tons of work while you're here speaking with me. It's all just accumulating in your office. Although you do have a wonderful staff, I have to say.
There's no question about it. They are a terrific bunch and really like people and want to be helpful to people and don't see their job as just pushing papers around. And they realize it's all about the people who come in and how can we help them. Because
usually they're, as we said before, usually because it's a time in their life when it's so upsetting anyway, or because they really don't know where else to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they start with you, and then you can help direct them to, if not your office, what office or where they could go to.
Yes.
So we have wills, we have guardianships, we have adoptions.
Maybe we should talk about our satellite offices.
Very much so. That's pretty recent, considering the whole history of the county.
Well, considering the whole history of the county, but there were satellite offices when I started, 12, 13 years ago. We now have added a few, though. So we have our main office, which is in the Hall of Records on Main Street in Freehold. That's open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. Please don't come in at 4:28 though and expect that we're going to be able to help you, because
if the office is closing.
Yes, the office is closing. However, we also have a satellite office in the Middletown Township Library. We're there on Tuesdays. Wall Township Library on Wednesdays, and Thursdays we split it between the Ocean Township Library on Deal Road and the County Connection on Route 66 in Neptune, next to the Home Depot. Those are all open mostly from about 9 to 4. However, the one in the County Connection is open from 11 to 7.
Oh,
so that's evening. Several times a month. It's the only one that's open outside of regular office hours. And it's right off the Parkway. It's right near the Jersey Shore Outlet, and also it's really easy to find. You can't miss Home Depot. And if you find Home Depot, we're next door. And people are able to come in after working hours, so they don't have to take time off from work. So I really like to get the word out about that one, because it's the only one that offers that particular option.
And if people wanted to know, because the show is on and maybe they haven't been able to write it down, if they call your office or go online website, how would they know where
it's on the website? If you call the office, you'll get into a menu which will say if you want to make an appointment at one of our satellite offices, press whatever, and then it'll go through them one by one. And if you press that number, you will reach the person who makes the appointments for that office. We like to do those by appointment.
At the satellite?
At the satellites. It goes much quicker because there's only one person there. So we don't want everybody to show up at the same time, and then you have to sit and wait.
Well, you saw the need when you became surrogate to begin expanding out into Monmouth County. Have you been busy in the satellite areas?
We do anywhere between 20 and 25% of our volume at the satellites, which is
it's a good number.
Good. I always feel it could be higher, but it's still a pretty decent amount.
Well, I know that I've had a few residents who have had questions, and I told them to go to the surrogate's office and told them where it is, and they have come back and said you just did a great job, that the staff was welcoming and they listened, and even though they weren't exactly sure what to do, what to ask, they brought the papers, which was the perfect thing to do, because then your staff was able to see exactly what the problem was and help them. So if you go to the surrogate's office, you should bring with you any papers that you have. That's necessary to begin a process, wouldn't it?
Well, if you're gonna probate a will, you need the original of the will with the original signatures, you need a certified death certificate, and we have an information sheet, which is online, you can print it out and fill it in and bring it in with you, or you can fill it out when you come to the office. And that usually will get you started. If there's no will, it gets a little more complicated, then you need to do more research and bring us more information about the assets. Your executor is the important person. That's the person who really needs to know where the original is, because they're the ones that are gonna have to bring it into the surrogate's office.
That's a great point, that if you have appointed someone to be the executor of your will, that person should know where it is, maybe have a copy of it and know where the original is.
Yes, well, first of all, they should know that they're the executor in your will.
That's a great point.
That would be a good start.
Yes, that's a starting point, because
Make sure
sometimes
they're
people would
okay
say no,
with it.
right?
Okay. Well, we have people who bring in wills that are 40 years old, where everybody named in the will has either died or they're 95 years old, and they're not going to agree to become an executor at that point in time. People don't see the need to update their will. They think once you have a will, it's good for your whole life. Not true. It should be updated as life changes. If you have a significant life change, like a marriage, a divorce, a birth, a death, you ought to take another look at your will and make sure everything in there is as you would want it to be now, not back then.
So what do you do if a will comes in, the executor says, I don't want any part of this?
Well, very often there's a backup executor, so we look to the next person who's named. Some people name two backups in succession. If we can't find anybody named in the will, then we look at what are called the residuary beneficiaries in the will. We look to the beneficiaries of the will, and then they have to decide among themselves who's going to be appointed. The problem with that is that we're probably going to have to require a surety bond from them, which is not the case with most wills. Most wills have a provision that you don't have to bond the executor, so we don't. But when we get into these other kinds of situations, the ones where there is no will and maybe there are a lot of assets and more than one beneficiary, we're going to have to protect the other beneficiaries and the creditors of the estate. So we may require that person to get a surety bond.
And where would they get that?
Well, from an insurance agency. We have a list of insurance agencies and companies that will sell surety bonds.
That's why I know some of my friends say, well, I don't want to do a will because, it'll make me feel like I'm going to die.
Yes, I know that. I've heard that many times.
And that's not the case at all, really. You want to do it to protect your assets, your family, the people, your friends, the people who mean the most to you. And otherwise, if the state comes in, they don't have that same personal feeling. They're going to do it based on facts that are in front of them.
It's a gift to your family if you have your affairs in order, because we deal with so many families, and we can see the difference between families where everything's in order, everything's simple. You bring in a will, if everything's right, it's done properly, it's the original, it's witnessed by two witnesses, it's notarized. You're in and out of there in no time. You get your surrogate's letters, and you can go and handle whatever needs to be handled. It's not quite that simple in many cases when there is no will. So if you want to give the people who are close to you the opportunity to grieve for you with some level of peace and serenity, and not have to deal with the business end of dying, which is not something you want them to have to be concerned about.
At a difficult time, it makes it a little easier for those.
Yes.
What if, I also, read and hear stories where people have specifically in their wills said that they do not wish family members or whomever to get anything from their estate. Can you do that in a will? Can you also say,
That's their call.
I don't want someone to have whatever it is?
We see that every so often, and I recommend when I talk to people that if that's the case, that they put that in the will, because otherwise that person who is disinherited may challenge it legally, and they may say, well, I think it was a clerical error that I was left out.
An oversight.
it was an oversight, yes, yes. Or they'll try to prove in court that you didn't have the capacity to make the decision, or someone else in the family influenced you to give them everything and to cut this person out. And I think it's a little easier if you head them off at the pass and just put a statement in there. We see general statements. You don't have to air the family's dirty linen. You don't have to say exactly why you're leaving that person out. But usually what people will do is they'll say, I am specifically not providing for my son John in this will for reasons that are best known to him. Or because I feel I have adequately provided for him in my lifetime. That's all you need to say. Or you don't just, I'm specifically not providing for my son John. End of story. You don't have to say why. You don't have to provide a reason. But the very fact that it's in there, and if at the time you did the will there was no question about your capacity, it just makes it really hard for that person to challenge that will.
And that's what those witnesses really are attesting to also, that they believe that you are competent when you're
Correct.
signing it. And
Yes.
now, what happens if those witnesses are no longer around? Do you need to have those witnesses?
Only if the signatures aren't notarized.
Oh,
If the
okay.
signatures aren't notarized, we're going to look for a witness proof from one of the witnesses.
Okay.
And as a last-ditch effort, because sometimes people will bring old wills, and the people who witnessed it were employees of their attorney's office 30 years ago, you're not going to find those people now. So in those few cases, we will get a witness who is familiar with the signature of the testator. The testator is the person who's doing the will. So it's really their signature that we're most interested in. Did they actually sign that will? Is that their valid signature? So that's the least reliable type of witness proof, but we use it in cases particularly where the will is very
You're giving me personally a lot of things to think about, when I go home. But we're pretty good about keeping up on all that, and power of attorney, we have for not only legal but medical as well, so that living wills, all of that, to really just make it easier on the people around you, so that it's difficult when, say, you're sick and they know that it's towards the end. Everyone's so emotional and distraught that if you've already planned all of this, it helps those that you love to be able to get through that difficult time. So, my goodness, you really do a lot in our office.
We do.
Yeah. And so much of it is spent also researching and trying to confirm everything. It's an awful lot of work. Easier now that you have computers, or not at all?
I guess. Well, I've been there since we've had computers, so I don't have any basis for comparison, but I know, I've actually been able to reduce the number of employees in the department by 3 because of advances in our computer technology. We have a new computer system. Actually, it's not new, but new since I've been there. And it is just so much more efficient in handling the work that we have to handle than the old systems. We used to have 3 separate software systems, and each one did a specific thing, but they didn't talk to each other. So if you had to enter information in one, you would then have to re-enter it in the next one, and on and on and on. So lots of opportunities for mistakes to be made, and you didn't capture the information once. Now we have a computer system where everything that we do is in one operating system.
That's great.
So once you've entered the information in, it's entered, and you don't have to keep redoing the same things over and over again. So there are efficiencies, to being able to do that. We're getting a lot of our records digitized. We have most of our records digitized now, so that instead of having to go and look in books and then on microfilm and on microfiche and like 4 steps just to find one record, we had over 80,000 fiche digitized, millions and millions of pages of documents. And now instead of a 4-step procedure, you go over to the computer, you put in the name or the docket number, and you can look at all the documents. Now we're on the second phase of that. We're getting another 80,000 fiche done. And we're getting all of our reels of microfilm of will books going way back, converted to digital format. put those on the computers. It makes it easier for the people who clean to the records room to do research, but it also means that the staff who have to look up these things now don't have to go over to the records room and go through that
Right.
process. They can actually look them up from their desks.
Right, that's wonderful.
So that is a tremendous time saver.
Gee, the laws change as well, or they stay pretty much the same?
Laws change all the time, court rules change, yeah, we've got to stay on top of all of that.
So not only the changing technology, but as the laws change, you have to keep up with that as well. It is never ending.
The need never stops.
Yeah.
The need, it's there. It's all,
Yeah.
it's a very satisfying office to work in.
And you're there full-time, I know
I'm
you're
there
there
full-time.
full-time
Yeah.
and beyond. Because it's for you, it really is never ending. But I thank you so much for being on the show. I learned so much. I'm sure our viewers did as well. I thank you again for not only explaining all that goes on in the office. Please also take back our thanks to your staff as well for the job that they do. And I think you really bring such style and grace to a position that needs that, because as I said, the people who go there need someone in that leadership position with whom they can feel that level of trust, and I know that they have it with you. And from now on, when people say, what is a surrogate?
Which they do often.
I know that our viewers now know what a surrogate is, so you can answer that question, what is a surrogate? And you know who the surrogate is, Rosemarie Peters, our Monmouth County surrogate. And you know if they have any questions, they can contact you. The number, as I said at the top of the show, will be up at the end of the show as well, so you can call and you can ask any questions that you may have, and you'll either be guided to the surrogate's office or to some place where you can be helped. So thank you again. It was a marvelous show. I really enjoyed having you here. I always like it when I can learn so much as well. It does. It just makes me a better person and a better public servant as well, because I now can bring back to my residents when they have questions some answers, although I think perhaps I will just say, call the surrogate's office, because you have all that knowledge there. So thank you again. And until next time, this is Mayor Barbara McMorrow saying stay safe and be well.